Welcome back to the U.S. Navy History Podcast. I am Dale, and I am joined by Christoph. Hey, buddy.
Hey, how's it going, Captain?
It is going good.
Oh, glad to hear that. Same, by the way. Thanks for asking implicitly.
Oh, it came over mentally.
Yep, and I picked it up. Boop, boop, just like that.
Trying to make me look like that, you jerk.
No. Hey, we're tight. Listeners need to know that.
Tight! All right, so today we're going to be talking about battles. We had finished our little talk about the Spanish-American War. Now we're going to be talking about the battles of the Spanish-American War.
Nice.
You love the Spanish-American War.
I wouldn't say I love it, but it's interesting. It's just like this whole period. I was just talking to somebody yesterday about kind of since the Civil War and through this period, America is just kind of trying to find its footing as a nation and getting involved in a lot of stuff. Maybe it shouldn't. And I don't know. This is just another example of one of those.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. So first, are you ready to get underway?
Of course I am.
All right. So first up is the Battle of Manila Bay. This was May 1st. So the Spanish naval officer in charge was Admiral Montojo. He was dispatched to the Philippines, and he was equipped with a variety of obsolete vessels.
They probably keep the good stuff closer to the mainland.
Well, you could probably guess how this is going to go with that qualifying word.
Oh, yes. I don't know if excited is the right word. I'm anticipating overwhelming victory for the United States.
Yeah. So the reason why he had so many obsolete vessels was because the Spanish bureaucracy knew that they could not win a war. And they were like, well, this is more of just a face-saving exercise. Now, the administration, they were like, I don't know if I agree with that, so we're going to... They were like, I don't think we even need to save face. So instead of sending the Navy explosives, we're going to give them to civilians, so they can keep going with their construction and things of that nature.
Okay, I did not expect that.
Also, the Spanish fleet in Manila was seriously undermanned by inexperienced sailors. They had really no training in the last year.
That's a long time not to be on a boat.
Well, they were probably on boats, but they didn't do any drills. They didn't receive any training. So
I see what you mean.
All their skills were atrophying.
That's unfortunate. I mean, yeah. All I can think about is the priority of governments and how they keep their military sharp. I mean, Spain, for goodness sake, dominated the Americas with their military power, and just to see it kind of decaying in this time period is interesting.
Yeah. You see, what you're supposed to do is train all the time. If you train for war, you'll do much better at war.
You know, that's what I keep hearing. There must be something to it.
Yeah. When I was on the GW, there were training all the time, especially when you're underway.
Mm-hmm.
You're having multiple drills per day.
Whoa.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I guess
whether it's fighting fires, fighting floods, it was at least a couple of times we had general quarter drills where we did a whole bunch of evolutions in one go.
I guess eventually it becomes so ingrained in you that you don't even have to think. It just happens. And everybody moves in concert. And whatever the difficulty is, you just know what to do.
That's the goal.
That's cool. I guess I don't know if you can speak to the world militaries of the 19th century, but was training just not that pervasive?
Oh, depending on the fleet, it's very pervasive. Well, that's one of the reasons why the U.S. Navy at the very beginning was so good,
I see.
because of the training.
Just over and over again, performing the same task to make sure that when it's go time, everybody's ready.
Yeah, that's why, when the British came in contact, they were very, very surprised and impressed by the U.S. Navy's gunnery.
I see. Right.
Remember that?
Yeah, yeah. That's cool.
So the Spanish reinforcements were promised from Madrid, but it ended up being just 2 poorly armored scout cruisers.
Oh.
And when they get there, Madrid was like, you know what? We need a squadron from Manila to go out to the Caribbean.
What?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So not only does that stink for the people that are trying to guard the Philippines, but I'm trying to keep in mind that this is an era where communication to remote places like the Philippines from Spain isn't as simple as a telephone call. I mean, I'm sure it took a while for the message to get there. It's like, yeah, we're sending, hey, we need something. Wait a long time. Okay, we're sending something. And then they get the message, and then eventually these cruisers show up. And then they get the message, oh, yeah, by the way, please send your fleet somewhere else. Golly, does not seem to be being managed very well.
The admiral, he screwed up because he decided to place his ships outside of the range of the Spanish coastal artillery.
Okay. Oh.
He could not
Defend.
have his coastal artillery help defend the boats.
That's not good.
Yeah, that might have actually evened the odds a bit. His intent may have been to try to spare Manila from bombardment.
Oh, okay. Could have been intentional.
And
just like, hey, we're not going to win this. Let's not get our place messed up.
well, it's not that. He didn't at this time know that anybody was coming after him yet.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
The harbor itself was protected by 6 shore batteries and 3 forts. Only one fort, Fort San Antonio, had guns with enough range to reach the American fleet when it arrives. But Dewey was smart. He really never came within their range during the whole battle.
Nice.
All right, so at 1900 on April 30th, the admiral was informed that Dewey's ships had been seen in Subic Bay that morning. At that time, Manila Bay was considered unnavigable at night by people who did not know the area.
Mm-hmm.
The admiral expected an attack the next morning. But the American consul in Manila had provided Dewey with detailed information on the state of the Spanish defenses and their lack of preparedness, which, made him decide, I'm going in right now. So at midnight, Dewey, aboard the cruiser USS Olympia, led his squadron into Manila Bay. As they went through the entrance, they did find 2 mines that exploded.
Oh.
But they were ineffective because they were well below the draft of any of the ships.
That's odd. I guess, does tide make a difference in that kind of thing? Like high tide, low tide?
It can.
Okay.
High tide comes in, the deep water gets deeper.
Right,
low
right.
tide, water gets lower.
Huh. I guess I never thought about that with respect to placing mines.
But of course, if they place them too deep in the first place, it's just too deep in the first place.
Right. And so, who knows? That seems like a weird... Anyway, that's unfortunate for the Spanish.
Mm-hmm. So inside the bay, ships normally used a northern channel between Corridor Island and the northern coast. So this is the one that they mined.
Okay.
Dewey used a south channel that was not mined instead between El Fragile and Caballo Islands. Now, there was a battery at El Fragile, but they were not within range, so the fire that they did shoot was ineffective.
Okay.
So at this time, 3 Spanish boats, the McCullough, the Nanshan, and the Zafiro, they pulled up anchor and left.
Hmm.
Yeah, they were like, I don't want to have anything to do with this.
That is surprising. Well, not totally surprising. Yeah, that's okay. Continue. I'm processing.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, these were American boats. So at this time, the McCullough, the Nanshan, and Zafiro detached from the American line and did not do any of the fighting.
Oh.
They were supply
Oh,
vessels.
well, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes much more sense. So at 0515, the squadron was off Manila, and the Cavette battery started firing shots. And then after that, the shore batteries and Spanish fleet now opened fire. But all the shells fell short because they were not in range yet.
Hmm.
Maybe they were trying to scare them off. They were like, look at all the lead we can put into the air, or cast iron.
That is something. I mean, there's something to be said about just the noise and the destructive display.
So at 0541, Dewey uttered one of his famous phrases. Do you know which one?
No, I don't. There's other naval quotes that keep coming to mind, but I know they're not his.
You may fire when ready, Gridley.
Oh, okay, cool.
This was Dewey's instructions to the captain to destroy the Spanish flotilla.
And I'm sure that's exactly what happened.
Well,
You said
at that point,
You said this was, what time of day was this? 5:40 something?
0541.
I know that sounds remarkably early, to me at least, but that's about sunrise in that area. I know, so that's probably when conflict would have, begun in earnest, we'll say.
Yeah. Hey, we can see the enemy. Let's shoot them.
Right.
So the U.S. squadron swings in front of the Spanish ships and forts in a line ahead and start firing their port guns. They then turned around and fired again with their starboard side guns.
That's pretty snazzy.
They repeated this 5 times.
Whoa. That's incredible.
They closed to within 2 to 5,000 yards every time. Now, the Spanish had known this was coming, and they were actually ready. But they were very outgunned.
I'll say.
8 Spanish ships, the land batteries, and the force returned fire for 2.5 hours.
That's exhausting.
Yeah, but the land forces were out of range.
Right.
So every shot there fell short. 5 small Spanish ships did not engage in this. So the admiral, he was like, well, you know what, guys? This is hopeless. Ramming speed.
Oh.
Yeah. So he took charge of the Christina and charged. Much of the American fleet's fire was then directed at her, and she was shot to pieces.
Eesh.
Of the 400 crew, more than 200, including the admiral himself, were casualties.
Oh, gosh.
And only 2 men remained fit to be able to man her guns. They were able to turn her around and scuttle her on shore.
Wow.
That will bring us to the Castilla. When she was fired upon, she was anchored, having her port side facing the enemy because she didn't have any guns on her starboard side.
That's odd. Why not?
Probably because they were trying to use her as a stationary artillery barge.
I see. That makes sense. And just put all the
So
guns
they-
on one side and okay.
More than likely, that's what happened. Unfortunately, though, the American fire cut her cable, which caused her to swing about, which means that her starboard side was now presented to the enemy.
Oh. That's got to be a bad feeling for the folks aboard that ship.
That's why the captain ordered her sunk
Yeah.
and abandoned ship.
Makes sense.
There was a Spanish boat called the Ulloa, and she was hit at the waterline, killing her captain and disabling half her crew.
Dang.
The Spanish ship Luzon had 3 guns put out of action, but was otherwise unharmed. And the Spanish ship Duro lost an engine and only had 1 gun left.
This is sounding pretty decisive.
Yeah. So at 0745, Captain Gridley sends a message to Dewey that only 15 rounds of 5-inch ammunition remained per gun. So he orders an immediate withdrawal. To preserve the morale of his men, he informed his crews that the Halton battle was to allow them to have breakfast.
That would make me feel pretty good as a sailor. It's like, oh, good, I'm starving.
Yeah. According to an observer on the Olympia, at least 3 of the Spanish ships had broken into flames. But there were no flames whatsoever on any American ship.
So, just for clarity, by this time, most ships, if not all ships, were coal-powered, correct? This was not a, like, coal-powered versus sailing vessel, or...
I don't.
When you say
think any
obsolete,
of-
it kind of makes me think that maybe they were sailing vessels or wooden vessels or something, and they're up against pretty modern American ships of the time.
These were all steamships.
Okay.
Yeah, these were all steamships. The Spanish ones would have been older,
Mm-hmm.
while the American ones, once, the Navy got into it, they kept putting out newer and better boats.
Right.
That was not what lots of fleets were doing.
I could see that.
And so the Americans also had, destroyers and cruisers that had turrets, while the Spanish had guns in place.
I see.
Gun emplacements,
Yeah, that is a huge difference.
which is why that one Spanish boat had all the guns put on the port side instead of
Yeah,
the
and
starboard side.
being able to just even pivot them.
Mm-hmm.
That's so interesting. How significant that one capability is on a ship.
Well, it allowed, instead of having to aim your boat, you're aiming the guns.
Right, and you can even sail away if need be. There's so many tactics. It opens up so many more tactics to your arsenal.
Mm-hmm. So the Spanish admiral, he takes this opportunity to move whatever ships he had left into Bacoor Bay, where they were ordered to resist for as long as possible. The Americans had a conference on the Olympia, and after getting a damage report that there was very little damage and no killed in action, they discovered that the original ammunition message had been garbled. Instead of only 15 rounds of ammunition per gun remaining, the message was meant to say only 15 rounds of ammunition per gun had been expended.
Oh my gosh, that's a huge difference. So they're sitting pretty. They're doing all right.
Yes. During this meeting, reports arrived of sounds of exploding ammunition had been heard and fire sighted aboard two of the Spanish vessels. So at 10:40, the battle was resumed. But at this time, the Spanish are not able to really offer up much of a resistance anymore.
I just not sound like it.
Yeah. So the admiral issues orders for the remaining ships to be scuttled and the breech blocks of their guns taken ashore.
What does that mean? Breech blocks of the guns.
So, back in the Revolution days and everything like that, when you abandon like a fort,
Mm-hmm.
you can't take those guns with you. So you spike the cannon to disable it.
Right.
It's the same thing.
Okay.
You're just removing a piece off of the gun, so
They're
it's
inoperable.
disabled, and the enemy can't take it and use it.
Okay. Cool. Thank you for the clarification.
You're welcome. So then the Olympia, Baltimore, and Boston fire on the Sangley Point Battery and put it out of action. And then they turn their guns on the Eula and sink her.
Wow. It's such a lopsided technological battle. You know what I mean? Like, what an overwhelming show of force by the Americans. And not necessarily if they were going up against an equivalently clad opponent, I'm sure it would have been a pretty intense battle, but there's just those forts and whatnot were built for probably, I mean, you said the Spanish had been occupying this for centuries, and so the forts probably have not been keeping up to with what the ships of the day could handle. And so they were just getting toasted.
Yeah. That's one of the reasons why the Spanish-American War did not last very long.
Right. Nuts. Anyway, that's crazy.
So the Concorde finds a transport, the Mendona, and fire on her. And the crews immediately heck no, we're out, and abandon ship.
Right.
The Petrel fires on the government next to the arsenal, and a white flag is raised over the building, after which all firing ceased. The Spanish colors were officially struck at 12:40.
That's very fast.
It was only a half-a-day battle.
With minimal casualties to the American side. I mean, unbelievable.
Yeah.
Or maybe completely believable if you really know what America can do. Hurrah!
Oh.
Sorry, just wanted to demonstrate my overwhelming patriotism. It's got to come out every once in a while.
So according to American sources, Dewey wins the battle with 7 men slightly wounded. Very slightly.
Nice.
A total of 9 injured and only 1 fatality. A guy named Francis B. Randall, who was a chief engineer on the Macula, and he passed away from a heart attack.
Ooh. Yeah, I could see that.
Spanish officials estimated the Spanish estimated casualties were 77 dead, 271 wounded, 2 cruisers sunk, 2 protected cruisers sunk, 5 unprotected cruisers sunk, and 1 transport sunk. So the Spanish did attempt to attack Dewey with a naval force known as Camara's Flying Relief Column, which did not really do anything to him.
I think the example of the one ship going for ramming speed and then getting blown to pieces before it was forced to turn around was probably a good indicator of we should be careful.
Yeah. So at this point, the Naval War in the Philippines pretty much get into just a series of torpedo boat hit-and-run attacks.
Okay.
While the Spanish do score several hits, there are no American fatalities. attributed to Spanish gunfire.
Right.
On May 2nd, Dewey lands a force of Marines at Cavite, and they completed the destruction of the Spanish fleet and batteries. And they established a guard for the protection of the Spanish hospitals.
That's unique amongst all the battles that we've discussed. I've not seen a guard emplacement at the hospitals, and I think that's cool.
Yeah. So, in recognition of Dewey's leadership during the Battle of Manila Bay, a special medal known as the Dewey Medal was presented to the officers and sailors under his command. Dewey was later honored with a promotion to the special rank of Admiral of the Navy, a rank that no one has held before or since. He got so popular, he decided to run for president in 1900.
That's right. That's, oh my gosh. Well, that is the time to run. I mean, if you get a medal named after you and you get the not just the top spot of the Navy, but the tippy top, you're doing well.
Well, it's not the tippy top.
Oh, it's just a special post then, or what is?
Let's see. Well, I guess it was the top one at the time.
It seems.
It's confusing.
Yeah, I guess since we haven't had it since, it's who knows what it would be. But that's so peculiar that they would create this position. I guess it is during wartime, so I could see that, even though it was only for a scant few weeks.
He held it for the rest of his life.
Right. I mean, the war was over in a flash, but he held the position for so long.
So the flagship, the Olympia, was preserved as a museum ship in Philadelphia.
Nice.
At the Independence Seaport Museum. Unfortunately, in 2011, the Independence Seaport Museum launched an effort to identify new stewards for the cruiser and announced that the cruiser would be scrapped or scuttled unless a new order could be found. Let's see if they actually did that. It's Olympia C6. All right, apparently she's still here.
Oh, good. Because I was like, I'd really like to visit that ship now.
Yeah, she is still in Pennsylvania. I guess everything came out good.
Nice.
And we can go watch her right now for general admission for $20.
Cool. That seems like a bargain.
We can get the Admiral Dewey package for $35.
That must be the top package if I'm to understand his ranking properly.
Like Admiral Dewey for a day with this package that includes self-guided tour or self-guided access to our building, and Olympia, a guided tour of Vicuna and a guided tour of Olympia's engine room.
Nice.
So, yeah, if you want to, we could take a trip out there.
Oh, we could take selfies and everything. Or I could take a picture of you and you could take a picture of me and, you know. Is that a Yui? I don't know. Anyway.
It's just a picture.
Okay.
All right. So, yeah, if you guys want to go see the Olympia, go out to Philadelphia.
Step back in time and relive, maybe not relive, but remember one of America's most decisive naval battles.
All right, so that's the Battle of Manila Bay.
Nice. That's a good place to start.
Right. So let's move on to the capture of Guam. So Guam has been under the Spaniards since 1668.
Dang.
And by the time of the war, it had been neglected and there were only light defenses there. They actually had only received, their last message they had even received from Spain was a month before war were declared. So the Charleston, under the command of Henry Glass, was en route from California to Manila. He stopped in Honolulu to more than likely take on coal, resupply, whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
And he was joined by 3 transports: the city of Peking, the city of Sydney, and Australia. And that's when he opened his sealed orders when he was in the Pacific after his stop in Honolulu. And I have the actual orders if you want to hear them.
Yes, that's cool.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Navy Department, Washington, May 10th, 1898. Sir, upon the receipt of this order, which is forwarded by the steamship City of Peking to you at Honolulu, you will proceed with the Charleston and the City of Peking in company to Manila, Philippines Island. On your way, you are hereby directed to stop at the Spanish island of Guam. You will use such force as may be necessary to capture the port of Guam, making prisoners of the governor and other officials and any armed force that may be there. You will also destroy any fortifications on said island and any Spanish naval vessels that may be there, or in the immediate vicinity. These operations at the island of Guam should be very brief, and should not occupy more than 1 or 2 days. Should you find any coal on the island of Guam, you will make such use of it as you consider desirable. It is left to your discretion whether or not you destroy it. From the island of Guam, proceed to Manila and report to Rear Admiral George Dewey, USN, for duty in the squadron under his command. Very respectfully, John D. Long, Secretary, Commanding Officer, USS Charleston.
Okay, that's pretty clear.
Now, when he shared the orders with his men, everybody got really excited.
I bet.
A lot of them immediately went to the ship's library and started looking at charts, geographies, and histories to, learn about Guam. Captain Glass alters the direction on his new course. The soldiers and the sailors on the transports noticed the change and were like going, ooh, something's going on. Could this be some fun stuff?
When he shares the order, I guess it's just with some of the commanding officers on the ship and not necessarily an assembly of all the seamen?
Initially, it would be just his boat.
Okay.
And then he would probably share the orders with the captains on the other vessels, and it's up to the captains on the other vessels whether they want to tell the men or not.
Okay. Makes sense.
But the on the other vessels right now, rumors are flying.
I bet.
Some guys think that the expedition was to hoist the American flag over the Caroline Islands and to stay there until reinforcements arrived. Others said that the Charleston was sailing to some mysterious island of Spain that had impregnable fortresses and formidable force of Spanish soldiers and a huge amount of coal.
I thought they were going to say gold, but I guess you can tell where the value is nowadays.
It's black gold.
That's right.
But the rumors stopped the next day when everybody was told what was actually going on.
Okay.
So among the orders were warnings of possible Spanish men of war in San Luis de Apara, which is the main port of Guam.
Okay.
With notification of it being protected by a heavy battery of guns. The existence of the heavy armament was verified by reputable travelers who had visited the island within 2 or 3 years before 1898. But again, this is 2 or 3 years. Lots change in 2 and 3 years.
Yeah, exactly.
So the information about the size of the Spanish garrison was not given. So the captain had to assume that there might be more than 1,000 fighting men on the island who were thoroughly familiar with the terrain. So Captain Glass, he holds a conference on the Australia. Among, all the captains and everything, there was the third officer of the Australia, a guy named T.A. Hallett, who was a former whaling captain. And he had been to the Mariana Islands many times.
Oh, right.
He told them that on his last visit to Guam, that the port was strongly fortified. Santa Cruz and the battery on Point Ortiz, he said, were effectively manned and equipped. So the troops realized that Charleston was expecting a huge fight because the cruiser began shooting subcaliber ammunition at boxes tossed from the city of Peking.
Oh,
They were doing target practice.
nice.
This training continued until the afternoon of June 15th, when the cruiser started circling and firing service charges at cloth pyramid targets set adrift from the cruiser
Man,
at a range of about 2 miles.
those transports had everything. I mean, I was just thinking where they got these boxes from. I know boxes are probably plentiful on a transport ship, but cloth pyramids, that's something, I don't know if it was just the engineers on board saying, oh, I've got a great idea for a target, or that this was standard regalia for a transport. But this is very cool.
Yeah. So by the time the convoy crossed the 180th meridian, the officers and men felt they were ready. So that brings us to June 20th, when they arrive off the shore of Guam. And they noticed that the only ship in the harbor was a Japanese ship. This was a trade ship. A lot of the men on the Charleston were very disappointed
I bet.
because there were no Spanish ships to fire at. So the cruiser kept going, and a small group of curious inhabitants gathered on the shores of Petey, which was a landing place down the bay. They were aware of the presence of the American vessels, for they saw them early that morning. So all of the important citizens of Guam were there, except for the governor, a guy named Don Juan Marina.
That's a pretty strong name.
Ooh, very strong.
Like, I imagine his dating profile online is just like on point.
So the officials that were present were a lieutenant commander of the Navy and the captain of the port, a naval surgeon, and a captain of the Marine Corps, and also the civil paymaster. So while the gathering was looking at the cruiser and the transports, Charleston then fired 13 rounds at the old Spanish fortress there. There was no return fire, and there was no apparent damage to the fort.
Really? And that's surprising.
The people thought that the ship must be saluting the fort. So a guy named Pedro Dutre sent a messenger to Agana, which was the capital, about 6 miles away, requesting the governor to send artillery to return the salute. So the captain of the port, the naval surgeon, and a civilian got into a boat and went out to welcome the visitors.
That's very polite.
Yeah. When they finally got on board, the captain, Glass, informed them that war had been declared.
It's like, oh, no, we're fighting, y'all. Oh, I wish I wouldn't have gotten on your boat.
Yeah. Because they are now prisoners of war.
Right. Which makes his order very easy to fulfill, because he's like, hey, make sure you arrest the governor, and then boom.
Yeah. So they are then paroled for the day to go and inform the governor of the war and to notify him to appear on board the American ship immediately.
Mm-hmm. I bet he did. I bet he did. I would.
Yeah. All right. So a little fun thing that happened as the Spaniards were being taken below to discuss what was going to happen. A guy named Francisco Portuche sailed across the bow of Charleston in a whaleboat with a American flag flying at the topmast.
Wow. That's good. I mean, I think I find it intriguing when we talk about how flags are flown and what they indicate. And I know in the last episode, we're talking about the fallen hero, how he flew a French flag to escape a blockade, and how that's just, it's more than symbolic. It communicates a very clear intentionality. And whenever this happens, it's like, oh, this is very significant. And it's not just as simple as, oh, that's a different flag, big deal. And I don't know if that's lost on my children specifically or all children, but I don't know. I find it very interesting.
Well, it's not over yet.
Right.
A guy from Captain Hallett looks down and he calls out to the guy, Frank, come on board. Francisco looks up, sees him, and he's like, oh, I know you. And he climbs on board the cruiser. When he reaches the deck, he's surprised to find a reporter with who he actually knew.
Wow.
This was a guy from the San Francisco Chronicle.
Small world, right?
Yeah. So while those two were talking, Lieutenant William Browenrather, who was the navigator, he comes up to Francisco. And he's like, why do you have an American flag on your boat? Why are you flying it? And Francisco just grins back at him and says, I'm flying it legally. So the lieutenant, he's like, I need proof. And so Francisco, he takes out his papers. Yes, there's papers now. But these were his American naturalization papers. And the lieutenant replies, well, 22nd of October, 1888, Chicago, Cook County, state of Illinois. So he's like, okay. Hey, let's go talk to the captain. So the other Spaniards, the quote-unquote welcoming party, at this time, they have left for shore to go get the governor. So Francisco and the lieutenant go into the captain's cabin, and the lieutenant hands those papers over to Glass, who looks at them, and he talks to him a little bit and asks if they could use 2 of his boats to transfer coal from the city of Peking to the bunkers of the Charleston, and offer to pay him. Like, well, you're an American. We're Americans. We'll pay you. You don't have to do it for free. Now, Francisco, though, he was like, no, I'm going to do it for free because I'm the only American citizen on the island, and I need to aid my country in a time of war.
Nice. That was a test and you passed. Good job, Frank.
So he did that the next morning. He sent his brothers and some of his men to go and help them out.
Nice. So, quick question before you move on. What is the rule with flying a flag on a ship, a national flag? Is it where the ship is registered or the captain's affiliation or citizenship, or how does that work?
Well, nowadays you fly the flag in which your vessel is registered if you're a civilian.
Okay.
So if your boat is registered in the United States, you fly an American flag. If your boat is registered, let's say, in Britain, then you fly a British flag. It doesn't matter who the nationalities of people who crew the boat. There are many boats that are crewed like by, say, primarily American crews,
Hmm.
that fly a different nation's flag because that boat's owned by a different country.
Okay. What if you have your boat registered nowhere, but you like the way a certain flag looks? And like, you know what, I'm going to fly a French flag, but I don't have it registered in France. What is the consequence and who administers the consequence?
The authorities for the people who catch you.
Okay. So it's not wrong unless you're caught, is what you're saying.
More than likely, you will be arrested. Your boat will be impounded.
Ooh. Okay. Okay.
Your vessel needs to be registered.
I don't know, man. Sounds like Big trying to take control.
They do that very well.
That's right. And that's why I'm little brother.
All right, so Francisco and his brother got into a buggy and started for Anaga. And on the road, they met several soldiers who were struggling with two small artillery pieces. Come to find out, they had been sent back because it was not necessary to salute the Americans anymore.
That's right. Go put that back where you found it.
So Francisco gets home. He arrives to a letter from the governor saying, quote, "If you give any assistance to the American men of war, you will be executed tomorrow morning at the beach."
Ooh.
Francisco just laughed. And he's like, "I'm still going to do it."
Yeah, when there's a giant warship in the harbor, it's like, well, I probably won't get executed. Probably.
Depends on what happens.
True.
So that afternoon, he got a little bit worried, and so he decided to go back to the Charleston and show it to Glass. They were talking about it for about a half an hour when the governor's secretary came back with a letter. And I have the letter if you want to hear it.
Oh, I want to hear it, yes.
Agana, June 20th, 1898. Mr. Henry Glass, captain of the North American cruiser Charleston. By the captain of the port in which you have cast anchor, I have been courteously requested, as a soldier and above all as a gentleman, to hold a conference with you, adding that you have advised him that war has been declared between our respective nations, and that you have come for the purpose of occupying these Spanish islands. It would give me great pleasure to comply with this request and see you personally, but as the military laws of my country prohibit me from going on board a foreign vessel, I regret to have to decline this honor and ask that you will kindly come on shore, where I await you to accede to your wishes as far as possible, and to agree as our mutual situations. Asking your pardon for the trouble I cause you, I guarantee your safe return to your ship. Very respectfully, Juan Marina, the governor. So Glass is like, this is a trick. So a ultimatum is prepared for the governor, and arrangements are made for presenting of it the following morning. At 0800, Lieutenant Brauensbrother was taking command of a landing party composed of the Marine Guard of Charleston, the Marines from the city of Peking, and 2 companies of the Oregon Regiment of Volunteers from the Australia. He had specific instructions to go ashore and capture the governor, his officers, and any armed forces on the island. So getting a party of this size together and where they need to be is difficult.
I would imagine so.
And, yeah. So the lieutenant's like, you know what? I'm not waiting. Drop a small boat. And let's see. Ensign Evans, you 4 sailors, and you 2 newspapermen. Let's go. So he landed in the harbor under a flag of truce, where he was met by the governor and his staff. After the introduction, the lieutenant hands the governor the ultimatum from Captain Glass. It reads, quote, "Sir, In reply to your communication of this date, I have now, in compliance with the orders of my government, to demand the immediate surrender of the defenses of the island of Guam, with arms of all kinds, all officials and persons in the military service of Spain now on the island. This communication will be handed to you tomorrow morning by an officer who is ordered to wait not over 1/2 hour for your reply. So the lieutenant was like, you got 30 minutes, dude. And by the way, I have 3 boats, or I have 3 transports filled to the brim with troops.
Oh, yeah.
And a cruiser in the harbor. So the governor takes his people to a boat shed that was nearby, and they talked. 29 minutes later, they come out, and they hand the lieutenant a sealed envelope addressed to the captain. Now, so the lieutenant broke the seal, even though the governor was like, hey, you can't do that. Stop, you're mean.
Right.
And he reads the message. This message contained the notification of surrender. He then says, quote, gentlemen, you are now my prisoners. You have to repair on board the Charleston with me. The governor was like, no, that's not how this works. You're being treacherous. You came under a flag of truce. And the lieutenant was like, look, I was here to deliver the letter. You gave me a surrender notice. So guess what? Tough.
I would imagine he was probably looking for some time between the time that the lieutenant had the letter and then he gave it to the captain that he could flee at least a little bit, maybe. Like, yeah, we surrender. I got to go pack.
Possibly. Maybe. So the lieutenant let the Spanish officials to write letters to their families, and then they were taken to the city of Sydney after sending an order to the capital to order the soldiers and militia to be at the landing no later than 1600.
That's confusing that the ship is named the City of Sydney, because I'm like, where is Sydney on Guam? I'm like, oh, it's the ship. But yes, I see what you mean.
That's why I said taken on board.
I misheard you then, because I thought it was taken to the City of Sydney. I was like, whoa, this is some international intrigue. But anywho, quick question. Governor, he's writing all these letters, both as far as insisting on the meeting or we surrender, now letters to the family, and very eloquent. 1898. I'm assuming, since this is a Spanish possession, are these letters in Spanish? Or does he recognize, oh, these are Americans, I need to write it in English, and he's capable of doing so in English? Do we know this?
I don't. I'm sure somebody does.
Okay. Listeners, if you are an expert in the Spanish-American War, answer my question, please. I mean, I'm asking politely. This is not an imperative. This is interrogative. Can you please let me know?
So the lieutenant then goes back boat. He takes the Marine Guard and goes back ashore. There, the Spanish soldiers were there waiting to surrender. They disarmed the 54 Spanish soldiers and 2 lieutenants and transported them to the city of Sydney. So after all of that stuff was done, Glass then goes ashore, and he personally raises an American flag over the fortifications, while music was being played aboard the Australia and Peking. Do you know what song they played? You got it.
I was going to say, in my mind, it was John Philip Sousa's song, which, of course, could not have possibly have been the case. But that's what it just comes to mind when I think of American band. I'm guessing it was the Star-Spangled Banner?
Yeah.
Okay.
Of course it was.
I was like, yeah, that was War of 1812. Okay, excellent. Yes. That's a good song.
Yeah. So, included in his orders Glass was told he needed to destroy the forts. But he was like, I'm not going to waste the ammunition. These things are so crappy in the first place. Let's just leave them. At this time, the locals were like, hey, Americans, let's go trade. So lots of small boats started coming out, loaded with like fruit and things, and they started, trading. The natives were not very up on how much American coins were worth. They thought that a nickel was worth more than a dime. And so the Americans were like, I'm taking advantage. And so they pretty much, paid half price for everything.
That makes sense.
So when the Americans ran out of coins, they decided we're going to defraud them another way. And they started using polished brass.
Oh, man. You Navy guys, I tell you.
Hey. I never defrauded a local. Lots of locals tried to defraud me when I was visiting foreign ports, but...
I can see it. Yeah, okay. I didn't say, Dale, I know you didn't do this.
So after everything's done, the coal's been transferred, Glass, he's like, hey, Francisco, you're now governor.
Nice. That's a good promotion.
Yeah. So he's governor, the arrival of a proper American authority. That, my friend, is the capture of Guam.
Well, that was, of all the conflicts we've talked about, this was probably the most diplomatic and least full of carnage. You know what I mean?
Yes, there was no blood spilt.
Yeah.
So, we're going to end the episode here. So, as we like to do, we're going to honor one of our fallen angels with the help of HeroCards.us. We are going to honor Lieutenant Commander Manert L. Abel. His hometown was in Newton Highlands, Maine. Served aboard the USS Grunion. He received the Navy Cross and Purple Heart. His date of sacrifice was July 30th, 1942. He was lost at sea near the Aleutian Islands. He was 39. So, Manert Lincoln Abel was born in Quincy, Massachusetts on July 11th, 1903. Son of Francis I. Abel, Jr. and Addie L. Abel. He attended Cranch Grammar School and had 3 years at Quincy High School. On August 12, 1920, at the age of 17, enlisted in the U.S. Navy as an apprentice seaman. He trained at Newport, Rhode Island, and was assigned to USS Utah just before that vessel's departure for European duty. In December of 1921, he was detached from Utah with orders to the United States to take an entrance examinations into the Naval Academy. And on appointment at large, became a midshipman in June 1920. He graduated and was commissioned an ensign on June 3rd, 1926. He was promoted to Lieutenant JG on June 3rd, 1928, and then to Lieutenant on June 30th, 1936, and then to Lieutenant Commander on December 1st, 1940. So after graduating from the Naval Academy, he served as junior officer on board the USS Colorado, BB-45, until January 7th, 1929, when he reported to the submarine base New London, Connecticut, for instruction in submarines. Completing the course several months later, he was assigned to USS S-23, a unit of Submarine Division 4, in which he served until April of 1933. He then had shore duty in the Bureau of Navigation, Navy Department, until May 30th, 1936, and for 3 years was at sea, first on board the USS R-11, and then later in command of the USS R-13. From June 1939 until August of 1940, he served as Assistant Professor of Naval Science in connection with the Naval Reserve Officers Training Unit at Harvard University. He placed in commission USS S-31 and commanded that submarine from August of 1940 until November of 1941. He then fitted out USS Grunion, SS-216, then building at the Electric Boat Company, Grunton, Connecticut. He assumed command of that submarine at her commissioning on April 11, 1942, in the early period of World War II. According to the U.S. National Park Service, after reaching Pearl Harbor, the Grunion headed out on her first war patrol to the Aleutian Islands. The USS Grunion and her crew of 70 reached Kiska Island, where they were assigned to patrol on July 10, 1942. The Japanese had attacked and captured both Kiska and Attu Islands just a month before, at the beginning of June. On July 15th, the Grunion reported she had been attacked by an enemy destroyer, fired 3 torpedoes, and missed. A later report said the Grunion sank 3 destroyers, but according to Japanese reports, she sank 2. Patrol boats 25 and 27, and damaged a 3rd. On July 19th, 1942, the Grunion was assigned to continue patrolling around Kiska with 3 other submarines, S-32, Triton, and Tunya. On July 22nd and 28th, the Grunion was told to guard exits around Asiska because the U.S. planned to attack the island. The attack happened on July 28th, and the Grunion reported attacking an enemy ship, but not making any hits. She was also depth-charged, but not damaged. The Grunion's last transmission to Dutch Harbor Submarine Base was on July 30th. There was heavy anti-submarine activity around Kiska, and she had 10 torpedoes remaining. She was ordered to return to Dutch Harbor, which was about 600 miles away, about 2 days of travel. The Grunion was never heard from again, despite many efforts to contact her. 70 sailors were lost. Lieutenant Commander Mannert Abel Lincoln was reported missing on August 1st, 1942, when the Grunion was lost, and officially declared dead on August 2nd, 1943. He was posthumously awarded the Navy Cross. His citation reads, "For extraordinary heroism as commanding officer of the USS Grunion during an aggressive and successful submarine war patrol from June 30th to July 24th, 1942. Despite vigorous anti-submarine measures on the part of the enemy, Lieutenant Commander Abel, availing himself of every attack opportunity with alert skill and efficiency, succeeded in sinking, in one day, 3 Japanese destroyers of the Taolichu class. By his courageous initiative and resourceful command, he inflicted considerable damage upon the enemy and fulfilled a highly important mission at the great risk amongst tremendous odds. He was posthumously awarded the Purple Heart and was entitled to the American Defense Service Medal, Fleet Class, the Asiatic Pacific Campaign Medal, and the World War II Victory Medal. A destroyer, the USS Mannert L. Abel, DD-733, named in honor of the late Lieutenant Commander Abel, was sponsored by his widow at the launching at Bath Iron Works Corporation, Bath, Maine, on April 23, 1944. Commissioned on July 4, 1944, this ship served with distinction in the Iwo Jima campaigns before she was sunk off the coast of Okinawa by 2 hits from enemy planes, a Japanese suicide plane and jet-propelled Baka bomb. Lieutenant Commander Abel's 3 sons, Bruce, Brad, and John, launched the Lost 52 project through 2006-2007 using a remote-operated vehicle and side-scan sonar. Based on Navy reports and other evidence, the brothers hoped to find the wreck of the Grunion and their father's final resting place. Author Peter F. Stevens, in his book Fateful Dive, chronicles their search and ultimate discovery of the wreck off the tip of the Aleutian Islands. So, Lieutenant Commander Mannert L. Abel, we thank you.
Thank you.
All right, XO, take us out.
All right. Well, thank you so much for listening. It was really enjoyable exploring this section of history with you, and we're really glad you're here. If you ever want to get a hold of us, for example, to answer if the governor wrote in Spanish or in English, we would love to hear from you. There's a couple of ways to get a hold of us. One, you can email us at usnavyhistorypodcast@gmail.com. We have an X account or Twitter, whichever you prefer to call it, where We're flexible.
Twitter.
X-Twitter. U.S. in History Pod. I think that's the handle. Golly, I knew. Okay, next episode, I'm looking it up. And at this part of the episode, you're going to hear it right. But to avoid confusion, look in the show notes. That's the right link. And then while you're there, you can see our Discord server. And you can join up. You can ask questions. You can talk to us. You can share photos. You can tell us stories about when you were in the Navy or stuff you want to hear in upcoming episodes. We're also on YouTube and other places where you can hear our podcasts. And in any of those places, feel free to rate us. When you rate us, it does some magic in the algorithm, and then more people can find us. So feel free to rate us, and if you can leave a comment with the rating, that would be great too. We'll know what we're doing, what we're not doing right. And any feedback is appreciated because we want to give you the best that we can. Lastly, we have a subscriber option if you're interested, which gives you access to very exclusive content. So consider it if you really want to support the podcast going the subscription route. So once again, thank you so much. Dale?
Well, we're going to wish you guys fair winds and following seas. Bye.
Bye, everybody.